kick things off. But my background, just to tell a little bit more about myself, has been in sustainability since 2007. I was working initially as a market researcher and consultant, spent 3 years, 3.5 years more or less, working in that space. And I worked on everything from photovoltaics, which is solar power, to other renewable energy, consumer sustainability labels. And I spent my time between India, the UK, and the Netherlands, where I seem to keep yo-yoing from. So here I am again. And after that, I moved to Canada and have been there since 2011. I did my MBA there. I moved there because I really wanted to get more involved in sustainability, and I felt there was more opportunity within Canada to do that, especially since at the time there was a very strong focus from the government on improving sustainability within the operations of mining companies, consumer sustainability and a lot of other things. So I moved there, and that's about the time the government became conservative and all of that went out the window. So I actually started working in mergers and acquisitions after my MBA, but in the renewable space. And after that, I worked with the government, which again flipped, and was working on carbon offsets and sustainability for them. I helped draft the first carbon offset strategy for the government of Ontario, which is where Toronto is, and worked on that for 2 years before moving on to found Green Story. So one of the big things that I saw that is happening within the sustainability space is there were lots of consultants like myself who were doing a lot of great work and creating all these reports which nobody was reading. I mean, it helped my resume quite a lot to work with the likes of Philips and GE, but I know for a fact that the CEOs, didn't see my report past the presentation that I did. So for me, it was really important to get out there and make a difference. It's not just about, being out there and trying to make a name for myself. So I started looking at what really makes sense in terms of sustainability. How do you change the world? And one of the things that I found was really important was the idea of consumer sustainability, the ability for us to make more sustainable choices. And if you think about it, all of us want to do some good in the world. That's a fundamental part of what makes us human. So for me, I was wondering why people didn't just choose more sustainable, greener alternatives, because it just makes sense from the heart for us. So I looked into it, and there were two really key things that stood out to me. One was the lack of data. Companies just didn't have the data to present to customers, and the second was lack of understanding from the customer's perspective as to what sustainability is. So if you and I go, we can probably understand what kilogram CO2 is, what LCA is, but this is something that somebody who's like just shopping for a product wouldn't know or wouldn't want to know even. It's like just too complex. If you want to make a buying decision, just buy it, right? I shouldn't have to Wikipedia what it means. So that's so we decided to tackle that one by one. I was very lucky to meet my co-founder during the same time as the MBA. We both came from a financial MBA, so we were one of 5 people who were interested in sustainability in the whole class. So it's natural we kind of gravitated towards each other, and we started working together, and we started ideating in the libraries and Starbucks. Met every weekend, and we came up with the idea first of like making it easy for any company to calculate their footprint. So we developed a set of algorithms to do mini LCAs and mini impact measurements, and we finally got to a point where we created this massive Excel file. Took us 6 months to code it, where you can calculate the footprint of pretty much any small business in 40 minutes flat. So that to us was a huge breakthrough, and we thought, okay, this is it. A lot of companies are going to want this and try it out. And we were successful. We tried it out, and a few companies did check it. But one of the things we found is, as a throwaway, we had put a visualization at the end of it, which will show like what the impact is in terms of cars off the road and all of that stuff. And apparently the businesses like that more than calculating their own footprint, because this made it easy for the customers to understand what they were doing. So we thought, okay, let's focus on that, and let's take the algorithm and put it in the background, and we'll do that for the businesses. Because even if it's 40 minutes, that's 40 minutes we found most businesses don't want to spend. They'd rather just do the nice part, the marketing and making it look good. So that's kind of what we did, and that's how Green Story started evolving. We started working on visualization systems and making it easy for businesses to show their impact. So over time, what has happened now is we set up an online plugin for shopping, for basically any online shopping setup, where a customer can go in, and as they're making the purchase, they can understand the impact that they make in real time. So if they were to buy, say, an organic shirt versus like a conventional shirt, like what is the impact that they make in terms of water savings, energy savings. So we are able to create clear visual systems which can directly speak to customers, so you don't have to spend more than 5 seconds understanding what your impact is, and you can follow through on your shopping journey. And this, for a lot of companies, has been revolutionary. You're suddenly able to quantify why you should buy that organic cotton shirt, why you're paying so much more for a sustainable product. And that's been to us, that's been like the turning point. And we've seen, like, right now our system's used by about 90 companies across the world, and it's touched, at least from our basic analytics done in early 2020, over 10 million consumers. So we've really had a material change in the world, and we hope our big goal is to get to 1 billion. And it's slightly insane because we want to do it by the end of 2022, which is about 2 years away. So it's not too far off. So we want to get from 10 million to 1 billion in that time. It's going to be a huge jump, but that's our focus. And the reason we picked 1 billion, it's 1 billion is all of us, the super consumers, people who can afford to go out and buy and make change our wardrobe every few months if we want to, and a lot of us do. And if we start changing our buying habits, and if we start buying more sustainable, that's when companies will listen and they'll start making more sustainable items, and that's when the world can change.
Yep. Very, very interesting. Beautiful theory of change as well. And I love that story of the Excel sheet that you started out with, and then figured out that they really wanted to have that visualization in the end. And it's so interesting. Like I know you do two things. You do the impact measurement and the impact communication. So if we look at communication, what are like the biggest challenges that you see in these areas for companies, for sustainable companies or companies that want to be more sustainable? And then, oh yeah, how do you help them to tackle these issues?
It's weird because I think the biggest challenge for communication is measurement. Because like when a lot of companies want to kind of talk about this, they can't speak numbers. Even if they're doing everything really sustainable. We work with a lot of companies who have put so much thought into every little thing. Even the tags that they make are biodegradable and made of organic materials to that extent, right? But they have no idea how to measure the impact. So their sustainable communication looks like every other company's. We're organic, we're natural, vegan, blah blah blah, right? So there's no distinction. What can really help them distinguish themselves is if they start showing real impact and can measure it and highlight it. I find the best companies that do this are the ones which, from the get-go, from sourcing itself, think about transparency. So they pick the suppliers that they work with based on how transparent they can be. Are they willing to work with them? Are they willing to share the numbers? Are they willing to share the data and help them measure? While companies who don't do that, even if they're hyper sustainable, they come up against a big roadblock. Suddenly the supplier is not responsive, but their customers aren't believing what they say. So that's a big communication gap that's there. Like it's measurement. It's a weird thing to say, but that's exactly what it is.
It's interesting. I couldn't agree with you more that it is about measuring. And well, I know we've had talks about this before as well. Like it's so easy if you want to become more sustainable to fall into the trap of greenwashing, and to start communicating about things which you cannot then prove with any data set. But yeah, there's also like the case of an organization, one business might be thinking that they're doing really well, and then within the rest of their supply chain, which they might not be taking into account. So that's also the thing, exactly as you say, like working with the transparent, like with across the supply chain and sharing all those data and then putting them all together. I totally agree. So you have, that's transparency, I know, is one of your pillars. You have two more, correct?
Yeah.
Maybe you would like to share them.
Yeah, so basically the way we think about it as a product offering from Green Story, one is the measurement, the other is transparency, and one of the main things we are doing right now is the ability to act on it. So what I mean by that is the idea that a company can now implement carbon offsets and be completely carbon neutral. This has been a big goal of ours since inception, because we wanted people to be able to like see the impact they're making, make the choice on it, and even like improve that even further. So even if you're a sustainable company, at the end you're still having a footprint. So we wanted to put us go stage by stage by to first like help companies measure the impact, help them reduce it, and like show their customers what that looks like, and then take the final step and get all the way down to zero, instead of what a lot of offsets do nowadays, which is like, you know, you drill for oil and you instead plant 10 trees and you're fine, it's net zero. That's not how offsets should work. It should be first reduce and then you kind of make it, get it down to zero. So that's a big release, and I'm really excited about this. We just launched the system on Monday. After like 6 months of research and development, we worked with a team of experts to bring down the number of projects we're working with from 10,000 to 700, which are highly vetted. And the best part about this is we have a preset list of clients we're talking with and we're launching with. So we're starting this month with 5, and we're gradually going to expand over the course of the next few weeks after that to 50, and then finally release it out in the wilds for anybody to work with. But the big thing about this and what's really exciting is now we can funnel, you know, tens of millions of dollars into these amazing offset projects around the world, and that's going to impact millions of lives and, you know, green so many communities.
Can you tell us a little bit more? How does that work? Because you're very consumer faced. So it's the clients that you work with, they have consumer products, mostly in fashion. You have a lot of clients who are in fashion. So let's assume a dress. So I log on to the platform or onto the Shopify store and I buy the dress. Then what do I see? What happens? So I buy it for 100 euros.
Sure.
And then,
If I can even do a screen share if that makes more sense to you guys.
sure, yeah.
Uh, okay, cool. So this is like a staging site, so I'm showing you an example, but the idea is, so this is one of our clients, Tamga. They already use our metrics over here, but what we also are going to do is, because we're calculating the footprint of their product, we know exactly how much to offset. And that's what's happening here. We can certify this carbon neutral, and as it's being purchased, you can actually look and kind of see what are the projects associated with it. So this is a new level of transparency that carbon offset systems do not have. We're also setting up alignment with the UN SDGs, so you can kind of understand what are the projects that you're backing. And then down the line, once you make the purchase, you actually, in your receipt, you actually get a link which will tell you exactly how much is being offset and what are the projects that you supported and how all of this works. And you can explore each and every project for yourself. And there's going to be like a carbon registry where you can kind of read about the projects and actually verify the transaction is done. So we're taking a carbon offset, and I guess we're green storifying it. One is making it consumer facing, and second is making it hyper transparent.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this is absolutely amazing. What we spoke about last time as well. So you speak about carbon footprint. I almost forgot that you also have like joined them in with the SDGs. I almost forgot about that one. But another important thing that you do is life cycle thinking, life cycle assessment. And if I understood you correctly last time we spoke, the carbon offsetting that you do is also in the area of the life cycle where the carbon footprint takes place. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Most of the companies that we work with, they're very community focused. If you're a sustainable brand, what's something that's very unique about you is the fact that you have very strong links with the supply chain that you work with. You typically care about your workers and you care about the communities that you work with. So all the brands that we work with want to provide more funding, more offsets to the communities that they employ and they work with. So what we decided is, when we did offsets by surveying all of our clients and potentials, is that we'll have a massive list of projects, but we will sort through them, and based on the company supply chain and the LC analysis done, we'll make sure the projects are most into those communities. So if you're sourcing from India, manufacturing in China, and like transporting it to the Netherlands, we'll have projects in India, China, and the Netherlands in those specific regions that you're getting it from. So it's more along the supply chain, and it's not just it's more impactful, because versus like planting trees in Brazil, which is great, but it's not really impacting the communities that you're serving, or who are serving you. So this makes it more immediate, and we believe more powerful.
Yeah, exactly. Just a quick question for all our participants. How familiar are you with carbon footprint calculations and life cycle assessments and life cycle thinking? So I can ask you if you are you very familiar with it, then raise your hand. So nobody's raising their hand. So I'm assuming Boudewijn is. Are you very okay? Seb, you're very familiar. You're familiar with the way of thinking, with the way to do one, how to calculate one?
I read several books around it.
Okay, that's amazing. All right.
Seb knows his stuff.
Sorry?
Seb knows his stuff.
Not as well as you do, my friend.
So yeah, what I thought would be interesting for today, like in all the sustainability sessions that we do, Seb also knows this because it's not his first time here either, is we do a collective exercise. And the past couple of sessions, we've done a creative exercise. And this session with Akhil is actually a little bit different because we're talking about footprinting and life cycle, and there's so much knowledge there. And one of the exercises that we actually do with clients as well, we don't do life cycle assessments, but we really want to have them have that way of thinking, starting to think beyond the borders of their own business, and really understand that they're part of a bigger chain, and that if they have a physical product, that product goes through different phases. So we call that life cycle thinking. So it's not the assessment itself, but it's more the abstracted thinking tool around it. So I would like to do that with you today. And because Akhil is so into fashion, and I know that Sebastian is into fashion, so we have a lot of fashionistas, we decided to do it with just a plain white t-shirt. But it's just to give you that understanding of the complexity of that entire supply chain, of all those phases that a white t-shirt goes through and what goes into it. So to give you an overview of that. And then what's interesting between Akhil and us is that we use this information to help companies innovate from there, to start like identifying the opportunities. A lot of ideas already start coming to mind when we do this. And of course, you go in way deeper with data and understanding all those facts and figures. So it's actually really interesting, and communicating about that as well. So we use them same but different, if you will. So let me see. What would you suggest? Do we break up into two groups?
No, I think we can stay all in. Yeah, let's do two groups. I brought everyone to the top one, to the top group, and we're just gonna go into now. Actually, on the other hand, let's stay in one group. We're not with that many. We're with 6. I think it's doable on one board for to work there.
Yeah, and feel free to just openly discuss this. Like, we can have an open conversation. If we do it all together, then Akhil is here as well, so we can have like questions straight away if that happens.
That's easier, yes.
That might be easier. So what you see here is there are 5 phases that a product usually goes through. So we start with material extraction, and it goes to manufacturing, then to packaging and transport. Then the customer actually uses the product, and at some point they stop using it or they throw it. And so there's an end of life. So when we look at a t-shirt, the first step that we do is material extraction. So we have a t-shirt ready made, but what really goes into making that t-shirt? What's the material? So I've prompted you here. It's 100% cotton. So keep it nice and simple for now. So what do you need? What needs to happen to make that raw material? So if you start to think about that, like the cotton needs to grow. What needs to happen for that cotton to grow? What kind of things are used around it? And if you want to pop that on some Post-its there, all of the things that you can think about. How do we produce the cotton, the raw material, and get it out of nature?
But cotton is unsustainable. Cannot we do organic cotton?
It will be very expensive.
Well, that's interesting. Cotton is the material itself. So if it's organic cotton, then they might not use any pesticides. If it's not, then they.
Also, we are allowed to choose.
Yeah, so it depends. Yeah.
All right, good.
But I think that's the most common answer of any LCA analyst. It depends. Maybe that's too much of an inside joke. I'm sorry. Lots of water, fertilizers. Yeah.
Maybe to support the climate, but I'm not very sure. One way we grow it in somewhere in Australia, another way in Europe, and there's not enough sun, and we have to support it in you know what I'm talking about, because you live in the Netherlands, so you grow a lot of vegetables, so the same principle. So maybe glass house, whatever.
Yeah.
Not very sustainable, but still is an option.
See, there you go. So there's already ideas that are prompting.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I don't think we grow cotton at all in Holland? I don't think so. I have never heard of any cotton being
at home for yourself.
Ooh, yeah. Well, they do make lovely decoration. I've seen that around as becoming a trend. So fertile land, yes. Any machines we use?
Yep, combiners or whatever.
Yeah.
Actually, they use people when it's grown somewhere in I don't know, Uzbekistan.
Yep. Lots of soil, lots of water, fertile land. Yeah. It's really interesting to see. So I'll just move us on to the next phase a little bit. So the second phase that you go through is the manufacturing. So the materials need to be processed, especially the cotton. I don't know if you've seen a cotton flower or bulb, or I don't know exactly what to call it, the flower of it, to get that into yarn and to actually be able to produce a t-shirt from it. There's quite a few steps involved in that. So there's no worries if you don't know this. I'm not testing your knowledge at all, but it's exactly to make you think about, like, wait a minute, this is actually a plant and now we're making it into a t-shirt. So what are the things that you can come up with that actually need to happen in order to get there? And a helpful way is, helpful way of thinking is in inputs and outputs. That actually quite helps to do that. So what do you need to put in, and what is the result that you get from there? So no, more water, yes. What machines do we use? And then the machines also need oil to be able to run. Yeah, dye, exactly. Chemical processing. Correct, dyeing. Bleach. Yeah. Finishing. Mm-hmm. See, Seb, you need to be in charge of music next time. We need to make you in charge. We keep forgetting to put like nice music in the background.
We can make that happen anytime.
And it's also quiet again, like everybody's working on things. Usually a good sign. Yeah, dyeing, bleaching. There's a lot of bleaching going on. They're spinning it into yarn. stretching it out. Akhil, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we briefly touched on, but I don't see here in either side, is the use of energy. Like you talked about fuel for machines, so you have diesel, but it's going to be there in every stage, electricity usage. If you kind of go beyond the linear system that you have, even the production of fertilizer requires energy, requires chemicals, requires electricity, and probably requires diesel. You might require coal for heating, depending on where it is, right? And that's all considered in the LCA. The transportation of the pesticides is considered in the LCA. The transportation of the cotton between each of the stages is considered in the LCA. So you have a lot of diesel fuel use, which typically you don't think of, but that's there quite a bit as
Yeah.
well.
A lot
It can
of
be
it.
easily bogged down on details. So yeah.
Would you
Were there-
also look at like the consequences for, like, for example, unsafe working environments? Or is that going
So
into
in a
complete?
typical LCA, you look at environmental consequences, but unsafe working environments can be kind of taken as a
Aspects.
consequences of that, like acidification and like the CO2 production, things like that. So obviously, if it's beyond a certain level, you can kind of conclude that this particular stage, nobody should be breathing here, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Okay.
So what is the hardest part of the LCA to do?
Getting the data. It's basically, if
Data.
you're going out there and talking to a lot of suppliers, like especially now with COVID, like they have a lot of other things to consider. They don't want to talk to somebody halfway across the world when they have to pay their workers and like figure out how to retool their supply chain. So getting that information from them is difficult. But what I'm finding now is kind of 50-50 right now. A lot of people are really interested in doing this because they're getting more questions from end consumers and therefore from brands on like, how is this done? Is this sustainable? Show me the proof. So the suppliers are being more aware, but at the same time, it's also a short-term thinking where a lot of them are just trying to survive now. Like more and more companies are still going out of business because of like the second phase of a lockdown in say India or wherever it is. So it's like a tough time for suppliers, and we completely sympathize. We're talking to a silk supplier in India, and he's been shut for 3 months now, more or less.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
intense.
and they're almost at a phase where they're going out of business, but they're coming back on.
Yeah. Thanks. Good question, Seb. Was on my list. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them or pop them in the chat. No worries about that. There's more going on here. Okay, feel free to move on to packaging and transport, just so we can see what happens in the total. So packaging and transport, I think it kind of speaks for itself. It's how do we get it from A to B? The cotton from America needs to go to Bangladesh to get manufactured, for instance. That's a piece of transport that needs to happen there. How does it get there? Then when the yarn is done, does it move to another spot? If we all order things from China, how is it packaged? Is it packaged in plastic? Probably. There's a big chance that it is. So all those kind of things you can consider in this part.
Yeah. I mean, packaging is always very interesting. I think a lot of people talk about like plastics versus decomposable packaging versus paper, but it really depends on the life cycle of the product too, because
Yep.
sometimes plastic could be even better. It's a weird thing to say because if you're constantly remaking packaging and it decomposes and the item gets destroyed, then the footprint is actually much worse
Exactly.
than if you just use
So
plastic.
we
You
have
reuse it many times.
Yeah, exactly. You can.
Absolutely.
So that's possibly an opportunity that you can pick up out of this stage. Is there a way where we can reuse the packaging material, the plastic that we use for packaging material? In our first sustainability sessions, we actually had Simona with us, and Simona is a sustainable packaging expert. So she said exactly the same thing. Like it's almost as if this is a very Dutch saying, as if you're cursing in church if you say that plastic is the better option, because people are so focused on plastic is horrible and it's bad right now. but in some use cases, it's actually better. For instance, for food safety, that was she's really focused on food. So yeah, so she does a lot of LCA calculations, or at least takes that into account as well.
Right. And one of our first clients was actually one of the Canada's largest vegan food manufacturers, and he had the same issue because they're hyper sustainable like in everything they do, but they still use plastic packaging because of that food safety issue. They'd rather have their stuff last longer and be safer than risk contamination by using biodegradable packaging.
For instance, so interesting ideas that come out of this stage is, for instance, Loop, that is working is trying to understand how we can make packaging circular again, if we can refill. So those are other options that you can then consider. So from here you can jump off and have ideas on, hey, wait a minute, we're using all this plastic, or we're using all this material, how can we make this more sustainable? How can we reuse it? Are there other models that we can start using?
Yeah, it's back to the milkman delivery model again.
For instance, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Some companies do this. For example, I don't remember, some H&M or whatever. So when you buy something that from this company, and after you return the old one, so you get some discount for the next purchase.
Right. I think that's also with the reusable packaging, there's an interesting balance as well, because they tend to be thicker and sturdier, which meant they're more carbon intensive in the manufacture. So there's a certain number of uses. So if they're made of recycled material, for example, the number of uses that it needs to go through to become on par with single-use packaging is much lower, about 1/10, so about maybe 20 uses, versus if it's virgin materials, it's more like 150, 200 uses. So that's an interesting thing to consider as well.
Exactly. So that's why it's nice to be able to play around and come up with these ideas, and then test them again against all the other knowledge that you can have, or redo the LCA for it, and then compare them to each other.
Yeah.
That's again why the measuring in the data is so ridiculously important in understanding what is truly sustainable and what isn't. Yeah, totally agree. Let me see what else people put in. Use plastic in packaging. Okay, so now let's move on to the fourth phase. So it's the use phase. And this is actually a very interesting phase, I feel, at least, because this is when, if we're talking about products, this is when it gets sold to the consumer. So very often the responsibility from the producer is offloaded onto the consumer. Whereas there are actually quite a lot of interesting opportunities, but also things to consider. For instance, for a pair of jeans, and well, might I say possibly the same for a white t-shirt as well, the amount of time that people actually wash it is a very, very big part of the footprint that the product has. So now you're seeing companies like Levi's or Mud Jeans or other companies who are also taking into account, wait a minute, we are also partly responsible for what the customer does with the product when they're using it. So they're thinking about how can we help the customer take better care, or wash it less, or do things differently in this phase. So yeah, detergents in this case, the amount of water that's being used in this phase is very, very high as well.
That's actually a very good Dutch Cambodian company called Good Krama that we started working with 2 years ago. Fantastic, Katia. And it's interesting when a lot of these larger companies, they tend to follow in the footsteps of smaller ones in an odd way. And the first thing that they did after we did the LCA was they wanted to do use case LCA to give their customers best practices on usage, washing, and all of that stuff. And we did a study on that, and the use case is responsible for like a massive amount, right? It can be as much as 40-50% of like the footprint of a product. So doing it right can really have a huge impact.
Is that just popped into my mind? Is that something that you help the companies that you work for as well? Because you do, of course, it's about buying the product for the consumer and having the CO2 footprint there, the calculation. Is that something that you have happened with clients as well, that they wanted to?
We have done that for a few clients. I think the Good Grammar is our first example, but the biggest and I think most impactful was ThreadUp. So for those of you who don't know ThreadUp, it's probably the world's largest secondhand retailer of clothing. And they've done, at least online, and so they with us, we spent about 2 years with them creating a carbon footprint calculator on personal impact. So it's like, what would happen if you buy a rental, if you buy second hand, if you buy first hand sustainable, first hand non-sustainable. But there's a big chunk on use case, like, if you air dry your items, if you wash it every day, right, things like that, right? So that a lot of companies have, after we did that, now a lot of companies have asked us to kind of look at their own use case and start working on that. It's a bit of an extra now, but I think like the big push was coming from what ThreadUp did, and it's really cool when you work with visionary companies like that, especially ones with a lot of influence. They tend to start these domino effects, and now everybody else is thinking, maybe I should do that.
Yeah. What was the name of that? Because I couldn't hear it right.
ThreadUp. I'll put the link in the chat if that makes
That would
sense.
be, yeah, perfect. That would be
From
amazing.
I've dropped a link from Good Kramer in the chat.
Oh, cool.
It's a while ago.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I put the link specifically here to the fashion footprint calculator that we did for ThreadUp. But if you do it right, like if you work with the right companies, it can have a lot of impact. This one got picked up like all over the world. It was on CNN, like Forbes, a bunch of places. So it gets influential.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, when I'm seeing energy, chemicals, energy usage in storage, wash with high temperatures. What else can we think of from a white t-shirt? I'm not too sure. I think this is pretty much covers it. So the fifth stage is the end of life stage. And that's thinking about, firstly, you would usually think about the use case, the most logical way to dispose of the product that you're thinking about. So what do people do when they're done with a t-shirt? And then you can start thinking of like alternatives. So for a white t-shirt, you might reuse it as a cloth to clean your house or something like that. Or you can bring it to, well, white t-shirt, maybe not, but bring it to a secondhand store, all these kind of things. What do people generally do with it? So find ways to recycle and reduce, exactly, throw it in the trash. Yeah, that's where it often ends up. Unfortunately.
It depends on the infrastructure. I find if there's a good secondhand market, it can go there, but really depends. I don't know about the Netherlands. I really haven't seen that too much here, but Toronto all of a sudden has like clothing drop-off points on every other street, and I've seen that quite a lot. But I haven't seen that in Amsterdam or Utrecht, anyways.
We've actually have that quite a lot in the Netherlands, where we drop off clothes to then go to other countries. But
Right.
I recently read an article that said that even those points were being over polluted, or there was too many clothes for there to be shipped out. So
and the shipping out is not the best in a sense, because what it does is, like, if it's shipped out to like a third world economy, it can destroy the local economy there as well. So that's the unfortunate thing. It's best if it stays within the economy where it was purchased. So it kind of keeps circulating around there. One of the things that we saw is like, people never wear clothes for as long as it should be. One shocking statistic, and I don't think that's true in the US, in Europe, is like the average dress in the US is worn about 7 times before it's discarded. That's kind of mind-blowing to me, that you only wear something 7 times. But if you think about it, like the best way to use up an item is to wear it until it's like falling apart, or like, at a point where it's not good enough to be worn outside, you wear it inside, and then it goes to rags, and then it can be recycled, right? That's the best way to do it, and that's what resale does. Like, resale is basically giving people license to extend the life cycle of a product.
Yeah, I agree. And then you also see these, this is why when you see these new business models popping up, especially around dresses. So of course, fashion and women is a combination that's very often put together. But there are quite a few lease constructions now, especially that are based on this data. Why do women only wear a dress a few amounts of times? Because they don't want other people to think like, oh, that's her again wearing that red dress with the whatever. So they want to match it. So they want to change it up. And that's why they don't want to wear it too often. So that combined with all this knowledge, I said, wait a minute, why can't we do like a lease construction for corporate dresses and for dresses that you really wear to specific events? So you don't show up in the same dress over and over again. Whereas for men, it's very different. You have 1, 2, or 3 suits maybe, and you change them up with ties and dress shirts, and you look different every time. So this was a very clever idea, which took exactly this data point, like 7. I think they said it was 9 times, so it must have been a different country. But yeah, combining it with this understanding of behavioral consumer behavior and their target group, like they're empathizing with their target group, they came up with this, and I took off pretty quickly.
That's great. I think it's interesting to me though, because like from what you describe and what I've researched as well, a lot of unsustainable behaviors are that is behaviors. It's psychological. Like, why shouldn't you show up in the same dress many times? Like, why would that be an issue, right? Uh, like I kind of packed minimal while coming here, and so did my wife. And she's like, it's really freeing to be able to wear the same outfit multiple times because you only have 3 outfits, right?
Yeah. I agree. This is yeah, we travel not too much by airplane, so please excuse us there, but we travel a lot as nomads, not having a home, and it's very liberating. Like you have to really pack lightly and minimal and go to that minimal lifestyle. And it is freeing. And we have a little bit of a little bit of an inside joke here that usually if we hang out with the same group of people if we're in the same location for more than a month, we generally know what everybody has in their closets because you start recognizing all these things that come about again. But it is, and why is our society this way is also a very interesting question. Why is it important to have to wear something else every time?
Right.
That is, yeah, that's definitely the interesting question behind us. Okay, so I'm just having a look at the time because we've been trying, we did 1.5 hours in earlier sessions and we've been trying to shorten them a little bit. So I'm curious if this exercise has, well, we've already also been talking to Akhil in the meantime. Any thoughts, any reflections, any ideas, anything that pops up for you that you would like to share with us or ask Akhil or us or... Have you ever done this before? That's a question I would like to ask you as well. Is this new for you or is this way of thinking new?
I have. So once it was a webinar in the PwC webinar.
Mm-hmm.
It was very interesting. So I've done this once.
Nice.
I just wanted to let you know, Pamela, that a couple of people just dropped in the last 15 minutes. So if any one of those people who hasn't really followed like the starting of the session or like the talk with Akhil has any questions about like life cycle analysis or anything that we talked about earlier, like green marketing and green story, and especially based on data, I mean, please go ahead and ask. You can drop your questions in the chat box or just like speak out in the group. Yeah, that was just in between.
Thank you.
I have done LCA before and stuff like this, but I've never used the app Miro. So that is new for me. So that's quite cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
me either.
Okay, so that was new. That was the new element here. That's fun. Sorry, Michael, please go ahead.
Hello, I'm here first time and I didn't know the agenda exactly. So it just popped up from my calendar when I came home. I did LCA a little bit in systems dynamics a lot as a student. And then I was consulting engineer, now I'm retired. And since 3 years, I think if I do something again, it should be something with sustainability. And because I did also some digital marketing in the last years, and I have a very good network and that on that side, better than the scientific network from before. I have made ponderings and thinking about aligning sustainability and marketing. The problem is there are many win-win situations, which is clear, which is I tested it with different locations and people, but with LCA data, maybe there are some open, but they are more or less private. There has been an LCA software in Germany called Gabi, German holistic balancing, which has been bought up 3 weeks ago by a Chicago-based company, Sphera, which do risk management. And I do not think that this type of American big company will let you use their LCA data. Because my idea was, because I has been a lot in software, to develop an app where I can do some bottom-up analysis with qualitative data so that people get motivated. And if they also engage marketing at a very early point, they get an evolutionary advantage and get maybe even more profitability than they thought, than they anticipated. So the second idea is that sustainability is a prerequisite for profitability in the future, else you would die. I mean, I don't mean in the climate crisis, but in the economic sense. And the third pillar is, so to speak, to make sustainability. I'm physicist by education, so I can follow everything on a rational level, but it must be more emotional. I don't know whom to ask, but it must be an emotional thing like COVID or something, because it is very important for, you know, I don't know, but it must be, emotions must be attached so that people get into some action. And the app which I pondered, it doesn't exist, of course, because I don't have the data, should be a kind of gamification. Or for SME, I forgot to say, I'm not so much interested, I never did B2C, always B2B. So where the company CEO or founder or owner does thinking about what investments he shall do to be sustainable in the future. This is a long march, a long road map. This gamification should be a very early lead magnet so that we get interested in the topic.
Okay, I'm hearing a lot of ideas. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, we're all ideas. Yeah. I'm very engaged and yeah.
We have. You dropped in a little bit later. I think because I
dropped in later. Well, I think half an hour ago or so, and I was never in the meeting before. So so maybe this my topic or my interests are way off, but I'm interested in so to speak, not in the LCA part, but in the part to make this topic more accessible. Because if you go sustainability, you have to change a lot of things. You have to consider the work space, the work conditions, the work processes, and so on.
Well, yeah. So, okay, if I may, I think there's a lot of parallels with what Akhil is doing. So I would definitely, because you dropped in a little bit later, recommend you to review the interview we did before. So a lot of what Akhil is doing is about communicating to consumers around sustainability and the impact that they're actually making. Mm-hmm. What I did get from Michael's story, which can be an interesting question for you as well, Akhil. So Michael said he believes that there should be an emotional involvement from consumers, otherwise they will not make the change. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. Like when we started off, it's a funny story. We ran this by several marketers. They're like, you're just showing the numbers, but marketing is about emotion. But one of the things and I think I was talking to Seb about it just last week, is that if we are a different set of consumers right now. Like we've been trained in numbers. We check calories, we count our steps when we run. So the idea of numbers not playing into emotion is out the window now. That's an old concept. So I think what's happening right now is if you show the data and show it in a way that makes sense, like for us, we use infographics a lot. We use like gamification. We should have the numbers pop up in part of the consumer's journey. It elicits an emotion. We actually have videos that we did of 35 interviews that we did across Europe of people, and the biggest emotion when they see the green story metric has been wow. Has been that novelty aspect, but also the fact that wow, I see numbers associated with my purchase for the first time. I know I'm planting 5 trees. I know I'm saving this much water. That makes me happy. And at Green Story, the number one thing we're aiming to do is like change the consumer journey, transform it into something positive so they feel happy making that sustainable purchase. And Michael, like you're a man after my heart. You told a lot of the same things, I was thinking of. So great.
Yeah.
I was thinking about just yesterday about developing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Making a course together with people who are in the target group. That means small business or medium-sized business who are pondering to get more sustainable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you two, you found each other in the expert. Just let me do a quick round to see if there are any other questions. If not, then I would really, really appreciate it if you go to the Miro board and give us your feedback on the session. So we have the third board all the way on the right. What did you like? Any unanswered questions? More or less of anything, and if you have any tips for next topics or speakers. Feel free to do that after. So for now, let's wrap up the session, at least the official part. If you want to keep talking, we can keep the Zoom open. So you, Michael and Akhil, if you want to continue your conversation, you're very welcome to do that.
Just wanted to add briefly that I added all the links from the chat in the board below the board with the wrap up. There is a link I will just briefly bring you all there. There are all the links to Akhil, the Green Story, to Green Sprint, what me and Pamela are doing, to our LinkedIn as well, and of course to the two links that were mentioned during the talk. So you can always join this Miro board later and then find these links back. I'll also drop them in the chat once again. Now we can go back to you, Pamela, and to this board.
Yeah. No, I just realized I did have one last question for Akhil as well. You just reminded me of that when you said what we do. So what we do with the Green Sprint is we help businesses innovate for sustainability. So this is why we are interested in life cycle thinking and this data and all of these kind of things. So I'm curious, Akhil, if you've had companies or businesses that you worked with that you know of that have started using the data set that you have to innovate or improve on what they're already doing.
Absolutely. So one of the outputs that you get out of Green Story is like a phase-wise analysis on where your biggest impacts are. So we've actually had instances of companies moving their manufacturing out of certain locations because they've seen the impact is much higher. Or for example, the easiest shift we've had, which is, to me, is like so simple to make, but with a lot of people overlook, is like flying your goods over. A lot of companies, that's what they're used to doing, so they'll just send it by flight, and we say this is responsible for 30% of your footprint. If you just switch it off to a ship, you can bring that down, right? It's easy win, and they're like, oh wow, yeah. And we've seen that happen with a lot of companies we work with. Within 6 months they made the shift.
Wow, that's amazing. And anything like more deeper innovation? I'm thinking of an example really quickly myself, not really happening, but like for instance, from the life cycle thinking, like these things we've already been talking about, to really innovate their business model on that level, when they had like these insights from the data, like, wow, okay, maybe we need to change something about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's happened with a lot of companies, so we do talk to like the clients we work with. We tend to have a deeper relationship with them. It's not like we try not to be transactional in what we do. As I see them as fellow innovators, fellow entrepreneurs, what they do. So one of the things that we keep talking about is end of life, and this is something that a lot of companies don't think about. So what we have helped a lot of companies do is think about educating their customers on end of life and start implementing things like take back programs, or partner with companies like ThreadUp so they can like start giving the products for resale, so making their footprint more circular at the end of the day, which is something they haven't really thought of. They thought, okay, they're doing a lot of sustainable things, but they haven't thought about what the consumer does with it at the end of the day.
Yes, and that's why that end of life part and that use phase part is so interesting to me. And it helps you to understand, like, and it also gives you clues on how you can redesign your product in a different way. If you start taking that into account, exactly, like you can even if you have a recycling program, a lot of people don't know that a lot of products aren't actually recyclable the way that they're designed now. So they're not designed to be recycled. For instance, the simple paper cup that you get with the coffee machine, it has a lining of plastic, so you cannot actually recycle it.
It's
So
frustrating, and a lot of people do throw it in recycling because they think it's paper.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So these kind of things that when you start thinking about, hey, what is the end of life case for this product? It gives you a lot of clues on how you, but it would mean redesigning the product. So yeah, I was curious if you've had those instances as well where companies have said like, oh wait, we really have to redesign something or reinvent something, but you have, so making it more circular.
Yeah, and even like changing like fabrics and things like that. I think we've had instances where we've, talked to particular suppliers, we've done the analysis and told them, look, this is not going to look good for you at the end of the day. So we'll give you the analysis, we'll give you the results, but you'll have to change these things. You'll have to change your model. You'll have to change the fibers that you use and things like that. And some have, for at least 50% of them, they've come back to us after making those changes and said, we switched from this fiber to organic cotton or whatever it is. And we've had like complete businesses change. And I think those are like really brave ones. There have been companies who've done that on their own. I think we've seen, for example, a company called Triarchy, which we're working with. It's a denim company based out of California. And they actually stopped business for 3 years to rejig it to be more sustainable, because they were doing like all this denim and they saw it was, and they were having a great business, but they stopped and they decided, no, we can't do this anymore. And they started doing upcycled denim when possible, and no bleach, and like ozone bleaching and all these different things, which reduced their water consumption by like 90%. And it's like, it's amazing, and it's crazy how brave that is to, as an entrepreneur, to stop doing business for 3 years, to do the research and make sure you're doing things right. So I'm really impressed with companies like that.
Yeah, I have actually, this is the first time I'm hearing of a company actually doing that. That's amazing. That is so brave. Yeah.